EVs aren't worth fixing. Sent to junkyards instead. The harsh reality of EV ownership is becoming clear. When something goes wrong, these cars often aren't even worth fixing. With a lack of trained mechanics and sky-high repair costs, many EVs are being written off and sent straight to the junkyard for even minor issues. Instead of saving the planet, they're piling up as expensive, unusable waste. Let's dive into why EVs aren't as sustainable as you might think, and why sticking with well-maintained ICE cars might actually be the better choice. Environmental impact of EVs. The claim that EVs are not environmentally friendly is gaining traction, and it's not hard to see why. At first glance, they might seem like the green choice, but a closer look reveals a far more troubling picture. The environmental impact of EVs starts long before they ever hit the road and extends well beyond their operational lifespan. Let's start with the mining of raw materials. To produce these sleek, high-tech batteries, massive amounts of fossil fuels are burned. Extracting lithium, cobalt, and nickel involves intense mining operations that are anything but eco-friendly. These processes not only deplete valuable resources but also wreak havoc on local ecosystems and contribute to significant carbon emissions. So while EVs are often touted for reducing emissions during operation, their production phase is a different story entirely. The heavy machinery and energy required for mining these materials are not powered by green energy, making the initial footprint of an EV quite substantial. Once the batteries are in use, the problems continue. Recycling EV batteries is notoriously difficult and inefficient. These batteries are complex, hazardous, and often end up in landfills or require expensive and environmentally risky procedures to break down. Unlike traditional car parts that can be easily recycled or reused, EV batteries pose a serious challenge. The infrastructure for recycling these batteries is still catching up, and until it's properly developed, many of these batteries will contribute to environmental damage rather than being part of a closed-loop recycling system. The short lifespan of EVs adds another layer to the problem. Compared to traditional internal combustion engine or ICE cars, EVs often have a shorter, usable life. This can be attributed to a variety of factors, including the high cost of repairs and the rapid pace of technological advancement that makes older models obsolete faster. When an EV reaches the end of its life, the impact is compounded by the difficulty of dealing with its battery and other specialized components. High turnover of EVs. The high turnover of EVs is another glaring issue that underscores how fundamentally flawed these vehicles are, especially when it comes to durability and repairability. You'd think that an expensive, high-tech car like a Tesla would be built to last, but the reality is far different. Even minor damage to an EV, something as simple as a fender bender, can lead to it being totaled and sent straight to the junkyard. This isn't just about the car being too damaged to fix. It's about the logistical nightmare of getting it repaired in the first place. So why does this happen? The shortage of qualified mechanics who know how to repair EVs, especially their complex electrical systems, is a huge factor. When an EV gets into an accident, it's not like taking a regular car to the local garage. Most mechanics are not trained to handle the intricate and often dangerous repairs these vehicles require, particularly when it comes to their battery systems. This lack of expertise leads to massive delays in getting repairs done, and for insurance companies, time is money. Insurance companies would rather write off an EV than wait for it to be fixed, especially when there's no guarantee that a qualified mechanic will be available anytime soon. The cost of repairs is also astronomically high, thanks to the specialized parts and labor required. So instead of dealing with the hassle, insurance companies take the easy route. They declare the car a total loss and send it to the junkyard. But this has a ripple effect that most EV owners don't see coming. The more EVs that get totaled over relatively minor issues, the more insurance companies have to pay out. And guess what happens next? Insurance premiums skyrocket. Suddenly, owning an EV becomes even more expensive, not just because of the initial purchase price or the cost of repairs, but because of the ever-increasing insurance costs. This turns what was supposed to be a forward-thinking economical choice into a financial burden. The end result is a vicious cycle where more EVs are junked over minor issues, leading to higher insurance costs, which in turn makes owning an EV even less appealing. The idea that these cars are the future of transportation becomes laughable when they can't even survive a parking lot scrape without being written off. The high turnover of EVs is not just an inconvenience, it's a sign that these vehicles are not built to last, and that the infrastructure needed to support them is woefully inadequate. Instead of being a symbol of progress, EVs are quickly becoming symbols of waste, inefficiency, and economic drain. Mechanic shortage. The shortage of qualified mechanics for EVs is a glaring issue that directly feeds into the growing reality that these vehicles aren't even worth fixing. Let's face it, EVs were supposed to be the future, right? But the reality is, when they break down, they often go straight to the junkyard instead of getting a second life. Why? Because there aren't enough people who know how to fix them, particularly when it comes to complex and dangerous battery systems. Take the UK, for example. Less than 10% of mechanics are actually qualified to work on EV batteries. That is a tiny fraction. The result? Sky-high repair costs that make you wonder if it's even worth it. And more often than not, well, it's not. So instead of spending a fortune trying to find someone who might be able to fix your EV, you're more likely to see that car towed off to the junkyard. This is the real kicker. Because these vehicles are so complex and specialized, fixing them isn't just costly, it's impractical. The lack of trained mechanics means longer wait times, higher labor costs, and the constant threat of making a dangerous mistake. Who wants to risk their life or the lives of others dealing with a battery that could go up in flames? Most mechanics don't, and neither should you. So what happens? EV owners are increasingly opting to cut their losses. When the repair bill starts looking like the price tag on a new car, it's a no-brainer. Why bother fixing it at all? The junkyard becomes the final destination for these so-called future-proof vehicles. And honestly, that's no surprise. With all the hype about EVs saving the planet, they can't even save themselves from the scrapyard. And let's not ignore the fact that the more EVs that end up in junkyards, the more this whole green revolution starts to look like a pile of rusting metal and toxic batteries. It's a harsh reality check, but one that's becoming clearer every day. The truth is, EVs aren't just expensive to buy, they're expensive to maintain. And when the bill finally comes due, it's often cheaper to just send them off to the scrapyard than to try to keep them on the road. So much for sustainability, right? If this is the future, we might all want to rethink our ride. Economic and environmental waste. The sight of junkyard Teslas piling up in salvage yards is nothing short of a criminal waste of resources. Think about it. These cars are marketed as the pinnacle of eco-friendly innovation, yet they're ending up as scrap far too often. When an EV is junked, it's not just the car that's being tossed aside. It's a massive amount of valuable materials, energy, and labor that's going to waste. The irony is painful. EVs, which are supposed to help save the environment, are creating a different kind of environmental disaster. Let's break it down. The production of an EV is incredibly resource intensive. Mining for lithium, cobalt, and other rare minerals required for the batteries takes a heavy toll on the environment. These processes are anything but green. By the time an EV rolls off the assembly line, it's already racked up a significant environmental debt. Now, fast forward a few years, and instead of these cars fulfilling their long-term promise, they're being junked at an alarming rate. This is not just wasteful, it's downright irresponsible. When these EVs hit the salvage yards, their batteries, which are toxic and difficult to recycle, add another layer of environmental harm. Disposing of or recycling these batteries is no simple task, and the infrastructure to handle this growing problem just is not there. So what do we end up with? A mountain of junked Teslas and other EVs leaching hazardous materials into the earth and contributing to a cycle of waste that is anything but sustainable. Economically, it's a disaster too. The cost of manufacturing these cars is enormous, and when they're junked prematurely, all that investment goes straight down the drain. It's not just a loss for the car owner, it's a loss for everyone. The resources that could have been used for more durable, reliable, and repairable technologies are instead locked away in a vehicle that's now nothing more than a heap of scrap. This cycle of economic and environmental waste is a stark reminder that EVs, far from being the ultimate green solution, have serious flaws that we cannot ignore. From the moment they're made to the moment they're scrapped, EVs are proving to be bad for the environment in ways that aren't part of the original sales pitch. It's time to face the reality that these vehicles are creating more problems than they're solving. And in doing so, they're turning the dream of a sustainable future into a nightmare of waste and environmental damage. In the end, advocating for keeping well-maintained ICE cars on the road as long as possible seems to be the more genuinely environmentally friendly option. Unlike EVs, which come with a hefty production footprint, recycling challenges, and a quick turnover rate, sticking with ICE vehicles that are properly cared for minimizes waste and maximizes resource efficiency. It's a choice that might not make headlines, but it's a practical step towards true sustainability. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel so that you can see more videos like this.